The RX has been nothing short of a huge success for Lexus for years now, leading the segment in sales pretty handedly. And the hybrid version, well, it's historically made up about half of those annual totals. And now Lexus is betting big on a plug-in version that builds on all the good stuff there with the added bonus of 60 kilometers of all-electric range. Importantly, though, it makes this the most expensive model in the Lexus RX lineup, which begs a pretty simple question. Should you spend big on this PHEV or save yourself a bit of money and stick with a conventional hybrid? For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Okay, so here's the thing, the RX, it's always been like the hybrid leader of this segment, but interestingly, there's never been a plug-in hybrid before now. I don't think it's a coincidence considering the BMW X5 and the Mercedes-Benz GLE class are both offered with plug-in hybrid powertrains. So this is, I don't know, a bit of a defending its territory. Lexus knew it was time to add a plug-in to compete with both of those offerings. Big difference. Both of those use turbocharged engines. In the case of the X5, it is an inline 6-cylinder. In the case of the GLE class, it is a 4-cylinder. But either way, those things, they use those turbo motors as well as conventional automatic transmissions. This setup here, it's a continuously variable automatic and a naturally aspirated 4-cylinder, and in typical Toyota and Lexus fashion, it sounds a little undignified when you get your foot into it. Not as bad as some other applications, but definitely not quite as hardy as you might want in a luxury vehicle, hybrid or otherwise. But I'm gonna tell you right now, as far as the seat of your pants test goes, this thing is more than quick enough. That's because it makes 304 net horsepower between the gas and electric motors. Again, a lot less, especially than the X5. That thing makes a ton more output, but it doesn't really feel like this is a huge step behind. And more importantly, this thing is far more efficient. Now, there is an important note on that front. This thing uses the same 18.1 kilowatt hour battery pack as the plug-in hybrid NX. It's got 60 kilometers of range, which is a little bit less than the BMW X5 xDrive 50e and quite a bit less than the GLE 450e, both of those plug-in hybrids. That last one, it has 77 kilometers of all-electric range, so a bit more. Now, I don't necessarily think you're going to notice if you're just using this thing, I don't know, to commute to work on nothing but electrons, but that is a bit of an advantage. But then this counters with just a way more efficient operation overall. It barely burns more gas than the Lexus RX 350h, so the entry-level hybrid version of this SUV. There's also a 500h that's more of a performance hybrid, but that thing burns more gas. This thing's good for 6.7 liters per 100 kilometers combined, which is more than 3 liters less than both the BMW X5 and Mercedes GLE class plug-in hybrids. That is significant. That is the type of saving you are going to notice within your first tank of gas. And then if you want to charge the battery, well, it takes 2.5 hours. And that means you could drive to work, plug in, and be fully charged again before lunchtime. That's exactly what you want to see in a plug-in hybrid like this, because it means you can really take advantage of all the benefits of this plug-in powertrain. Some of them that take longer to charge, well, you charge, you get to work, and then you got to wait until you get home because you're not going to get a full charge. And then as far as the hybrid operation goes, well, they burn more gas. Even examples like the Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid, that thing isn't all that efficient once the battery is drained. But in typical Toyota and Lexus fashion, this thing is still great on gas, even when you don't have the battery fully charged up. I absolutely love that. Even this morning, I didn't charge. I showed up to this shoot with 45 kilometers of electric range, we've been cruising around doing our thing, doing all that filming on nothing but battery power earlier, because you guys know I hate idling unnecessarily. Even when it's cold like this, I feel bad for video producer extraordinaire Will Johnson, but hey, what can I say? I am a friend of the environment, but considering we've been out here for a few hours now, I still have 33 kilometers of electric range in this battery pack. That is outstanding. Now, when you line up all three, the Lexus, BMW, and Mercedes plug-in hybrids, pricing, not all that different. This one's right around 87 grand before freight and tax. Both of those are just over $90,000. But very important to point out here that this thing comes fully decked out. It's got this executive package that's optional with the 350h. It has everything you could ask for and more. If you take a look at that X5, there are lots of expensive upgrades that you are going to want to add, especially to get it up to the same standards as this. And speaking of standards, I'd usually say that Lexus products, they're a short step behind BMW and Mercedes when it comes to interior materials. The quality just not quite on the same level, but that is not the case here. This stuff is fantastic. This leather, this suede, it feels great, it looks great. This wouldn't be out of place in either of those entries, and that is very good news if you are looking at this Lexus, because it feels like it's worth the nearly 90 grand you are going to pay for it before tax. The only options, some dealer installed accessories and paint like this one I'm driving. I don't know, 500 bucks will get you a cool shade of paint like this Cloudburst Gray. That's not too bad in my opinion. And then when you take a look at this interior, this color combination is just perfect. It makes this feel really luxurious. It looks really good. It's sort of understated and cool. So is this cabin overall. Now, this RX was newly introduced in 2023. It got rid of a bunch of physical controls. It's got this massive touchscreen. It's got widescreen Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both of those are wireless. It's got these dedicated touch controls for the climate system, which is great that they're on the screen all the time, but they're not easy to use at a glance the way physical controls are. And even these dials for the temperature control, they're not super notchy, so you can't really tell how many clicks of the dial you've turned in either direction. That I don't love, but some other stuff in here does make up for it. A big one that I really love is this little shortcut button here that you can pull up some kind of quick access features. So if you want to change the drive mode, even the head-up display, you can do that here. I really like that because you're not fumbling through a bunch of pages to get to those kind of important features. That I very much enjoy. I also like the buttons down here around the gear selector. One thing I don't like so much, the default setting is to run in electric mode first, but I like to run it in hybrid, and a couple times I forgot to switch it over. So that's a bit of a nuisance, but it's something that doesn't take too long to get used to. So that is really cool. This thing's also got tons of space. I can sit in the back, no problem. Headroom's a little tight with this sunroof, but I wouldn't say I'm uncomfortable. That's always been the case with the RX, and it's very nice to see it carry over into this plug-in that has that big battery pack under the back seat. I also have to give Lexus's engineers a huge shout out here. I was convinced that this thing was riding on the optional adaptive dampers that are usually reserved for the F-Sport packages that Lexus offers. That's not the case here. It's just conventional coil springs in the back. This thing is so smooth, so buttery. It does a great job absorbing bumps and keeping the body reasonably well controlled. Of course, this thing is heavy, but it doesn't really feel like it from behind the wheel. I do wish it had just a bit more steering feel, but it does firm up pretty nicely once you get above about 60 kilometers an hour. This thing is quiet, it's supple, it's great. It is very luxurious from behind the wheel. Again, that's what you want to see, especially when you're forking out this kind of dough for a 5-passenger family hauler. And then, getting back to that executive package, well, it means this thing's got heated and ventilated front and rear seats, a pretty awesome stereo, all the features you could ask for. Well, almost. A couple important ones missing, actually 4 of them. Proper door handles. I really don't understand why Lexus went to these push button door releases in here. I know Jody went on about it in her RX review. It's just dumb. It's reinventing the wheel for no apparent reason, especially because you can still pull these. So I don't understand what the logic was. This is sort of your, I don't know, get out. If you really need to, you can pull this door handle if the electronic releases stop working, but then why even go to the electronic releases in the first place? Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Anyways, everything else you'd expect, including a full advanced safety suite. It's got a ton of features, although I will say pretty sensitive with this weird right-left cross-traffic alert sort of thing that seems to warn you every time you're pulling out of a driveway if there's traffic coming, even if you're not moving. Not a danger thing. And here's the problem. I find that in talking to people over the years, when vehicles have these very sensitive safety systems, they say, oh yeah, I just shut those off. Just too much of an annoyance. And I get that, but it also defeats the purpose of having those systems in the first place. Those are supposed to keep you and your family, as well as other road users, safe. But if they're so sensitive that you're turning them off, well, that is a fail. I'd really like to see this system dialed back just a little bit, but at the same time, it is nice to have. And when it's working properly, it does have your back, and that's exactly what you want to see. To recap, I like the outstanding materials inside the Lexus RX 450h Plus, the supple ride quality, and its competitive pricing next to rivals like the BMW X5 xDrive 50e and Mercedes GLE 450e. I don't like the door release buttons it has instead of proper pull handles, or that it doesn't have as much range as that Mercedes. Okay, so all that brings us back to my question off the top. Should you shell out for this thing, or should you stick with the conventional version and save yourself a bit of money in the process? And the reality is there is nothing wrong with either, but if you don't mind spending a bit more and you can be diligent about plugging in as often as possible, there's really no downside here, because this thing is about as efficient as the 350h with the added bonus of enough all-electric range to cover most short drives. If you are shopping for that entry-level hybrid with this pricey executive package, do yourself a favor and drive this one first. Yes, it's still going to cost you about 10 grand more, but for that extra money, you're getting what just might be the best vehicle in the Lexus lineup.